A shocking disappearance.
This was a real whodunit mystery, with the people being involved being powerful.
A desperate family.
They lived in a neighborhood where the police didn't come searching for a dead body.
And a 10-year quest for the truth.
I would like to know if something happened to my wife.
A perfect life destroyed by the perfect crime. Tonight on Power, Privilege, and Justice.
On a warm day in late August 1996, a Nashville attorney named Levine March walks into the police department to report his wife missing. With his father-in-law and brother-in-law at his side, Perry tells police that 33-year-old Janet hasn't been seen or heard from in over 2 weeks.
Levine March said she just left. She just got angry and she just left. He told the police that his wife had gotten upset with him because he didn't do enough work around the house.
At this particular night, they had an argument that Janet determined she was just going to leave and that she would be back in 12 days. She drove off in the Volvo with her luggage.
Janet didn't tell her husband where she was going. He says all she left behind was a long to-do list, which he had signed at the bottom.
The list is marked Perry's turn for Janet's 12-day vacation. Some of the things on the list is do children's laundry, go through bill drawer and pay bills. Everyday type things, but it was as if she was having to remind him to do these things.
The night she left, Perry had told Janet's parents, Carolyn and Larry Levine, about her departure, and they anxiously awaited her return. But once 12 days had come and gone, the Levines' concern turned to panic.
I believe Larry Levine even gets somewhat criticized by the detective for not coming forward sooner.
Janet March's disappearance came to light 2 weeks after her husband said that she went missing. And it was 2 weeks of time that the police lost.
Police begin their investigation at the March home in Forest Hills, one of Nashville's most exclusive neighborhoods. The March's babysitter tells them something hadn't felt right the day Janet disappeared.
She saw Janet working on the computer, and she knew Janet was consumed most of the day working on the computer, which was not typical Janet.
Speaking to Janet's friends, police discover that the timing of Janet's vacation is highly suspicious.
Her oldest son, Sammy, was going to be 6 years old. Janet had sent the invitations out for his birthday party.
Sammy's birthday had arrived, but Janet still didn't come home. Perry and the Levines decided to go ahead with the party anyway.
People that knew her said, well, why would she send out invitations for a birthday party and not attend the party?
She also doesn't call, write, send a card, send a present, anything.
Also, no one who knew her could imagine that Janet would miss Sammy's first day of school.
Sammy was very upset because he told the teacher that he never got to say goodbye to his mom. Anyone who knew Janet said that this was simply way out of character for her.
The police searched everywhere.
We would check anywhere that a person may be able to go and be somewhat anonymous. Maybe she had some sort of a nervous breakdown. Maybe there was hospitalization going on. Maybe she was in jail somewhere. And there was absolutely no clue of her.
Finally, 9 days after Janet was reported missing, police get a lead. Someone has spotted her car.
It was a 1996 Volvo 850, and it was backed into the Brooksworth Apartments, which was approximately 4.8 miles from the March household.
Those who knew Janet March said that she wasn't a very good driver and wouldn't have backed into a parking space.
Inside the vehicle, we find personal items, clothing, toiletries, identification, driver's license, passports, and things that a person wouldn't leave in their car under normal circumstances.
Her shoes were up under the brake pedal. Her pocketbook was upside down in the driver's side door pocket. Very unusual. Looked to us like it was a stage scene more than anything else.
Investigators are now convinced that whatever happened to Janet March, there was foul play involved.
The case changed from a missing persons case to a homicide investigation.
A murder in Forest Hills? It seemed impossible. But then again, suburban moms don't usually abandon their kids, hop in their Volvos, and drive off into the sunset. There were secrets lurking on Blackberry Road, and the cops were determined to find them.
Investigators quickly get a warrant to search the March's 5-acre estate for clues.
We brought in police recruits from the training academy because what we needed at that time was just the manpower, looking for anything that could be considered evidence, just a clue. Aviation was brought in to do aerial reconnaissance to see if there was anything we could see from the air.
They had a heat-seeking helicopter that would find a body. It was an extensive search.
Inside the house, investigators are eager to find out what Janet was doing on the computer the day of her disappearance. But when they check the home office, they make a shocking discovery.
The hard drive was ripped out of his computer. It was inexplicable. Perry had no explanation as to why the hard drive was missing.
That's when they got really suspicious.
Police suspect that Perry, not Janet, might have written the to-do list and thrown away the hard drive to cover it up.
The police actually told Perry March that they were interested in the hard drive, and then they go over there and it's gone.
Perry March was not acting as you would expect a grieving husband, so to speak, to act. I recall him being with his brother Ron, and I recall him being outside on the patio, eating Italian food and smoking cigars. And it was pretty clear to us that his input and his interest in finding his wife Janet was zero.
Perry quickly emerges as the only suspect in his wife's disappearance. But instead of laying low, he goes on a media blitz, proclaiming his innocence all over the nightly news.
I am beside myself that not only have I lost my wife and the mother of my children, but I don't have people hugging me and telling me how much they want to help me. I have police saying you did it.
So we're supposed to believe that she would walk away from her 2 children, walk away from a wonderful family life, mother and father, siblings she was very close with, and just have absolutely no contact with them.
Her friend said that she wouldn't have been the kind of wife that said, hey, I've had enough. I want to go live my life and do something else. That wasn't Janet March.
The Levines begin to realize that waiting 2 weeks to report their daughter missing may have been the worst mistake of their lives.
A lot of people think, you know, how could they have been so stupid to not go to the police?
They believed in Perry. They believed in what Perry was telling them. And so they decided to go ahead and wait and take him at his word that Janet said she was going on a 12-day vacation.
You know, they really didn't want to think that something horrible had happened to their daughter.
Then, things turn even worse for the Levines. Just 3 weeks into the investigation, Perry packs up his children and moves to Chicago.
As soon as it became obvious that he was a suspect, he was out of here, which of course made him look much more suspicious.
I'm a suspect. I'm a villain. There's only one way the police are going to clear my name, and that's find my wife or find someone who did something to my wife.
As shady as Perry seemed to be, the police didn't have anything on him. Unless they could turn up a body or a body of evidence, their prime suspect was totally untouchable.
In the fall of 1996, Nashville, Tennessee is embroiled in a puzzling mystery.
Janet March vanished more than 2 months ago. Police say her husband, Perry March, remains the prime suspect.
From the day that she was reported missing, this town has been consumed with the disappearance of Janet March.
There were so many theories about what happened to Janet March, whether anything had happened to Janet March. There were Janet March sightings.
Somebody had seen Janet at a truck stop out in Smyrna, you know, and which was just absurd. I mean, if Janet were alive, she was not hanging out at the truck stop in Smyrna.
Suddenly, there were more sightings of Janet March than there were of Elvis. The young mother's tragic disappearance had officially turned into tabloid tripe. Quite a departure from the fairy tale romance that started the whole thing off.
Janet and Perry had met at the University of Michigan. Much like Janet's parents had met at the University of Michigan before them, this was the man that she wanted to marry. And the Levines were very much in favor. Wanted to be a lawyer just like Larry, you know, wanted to go to law school just where Mr. Levine did. This was the quote-unquote nice Jewish boy who had a bright future.
As Larry Levine has said, that if his daughter loved Perry March, that was good enough for him.
Janet's father, Larry Levine, was a wealthy and successful lawyer. He and his wife, Carolyn, were respected members of Nashville's close-knit Jewish community.
They were in the upper echelon of that society. Larry Levine was a very powerful and influential insurance defense attorney.
In 1986, Janet and Perry were married, and Perry's lifestyle improved dramatically.
The March family didn't have the money of the Levine family, nowhere near. So clearly, economically, was it a step up? Sure. Perry went to them for everything. I mean, everything was paid for by the Levines.
Carolyn and Lawrence Levine funded his education at Vanderbilt University Law School. They paid for his books, his living expenses. The Levines really helped him have the lifestyle that he had here in Nashville.
I think they loved him and treated him as a son, basically.
By 1992, Perry and Janet had 2 young children, a boy, Sammy, and a girl named Sephora.
Well, they seemed to have it all. Were well accepted in the community and just seemed to be like a perfect life.
Perry became a successful attorney, and Janet's career as an artist and illustrator was blooming. In 1995, the young family moved into a sprawling 5,000-square-foot mansion in one of Nashville's most expensive neighborhoods.
They lived in Janet's dream home, and she worked on every last detail to make sure that this house was absolutely beautiful.
But 9 years into their marriage, just a few months before Janet disappeared, the picture was not as rosy.
The two were fighting. They were fighting so much. They were fighting in front of her parents, and it had concerned them.
Everyone around him, close to him and Janet, knew the marriage was in serious trouble.
Police discovered that when it came to Perry's career, he had covered up a chilling secret.
Perry had worked at one of Nashville's largest and most prestigious law firms, Bass, Sims, and he was forced out of that firm.
A female paralegal at the company had received 3 mysterious letters.
She had no idea who was sending the letters. and these letters were sexually very explicit.
After an internal investigation at the firm, they discovered that it was Perry March who was sending this woman the letters. He agreed to pay her some money to avoid a lawsuit. It was about $25,000.
And then he left that firm and went to work for the Levines.
Larry Levine never knew the real reason why Perry left his previous firm. But apparently, Janet had discovered her husband's dirty secret.
They were gathering up her belongings, and someone at the house found a manila envelope, and it had Janet March's name on it, and it had copies of the letters that were sent to the paralegal years earlier, along with a condom wrapper. The police believe that Janet March discovered what happened with Perry March at Bass, Berry and Sims the day before she disappeared.
I believe that she threatened him with divorce, and, you know, when she looked at Perry and said, "I'm going to divorce you," it was a lot more than "I'm just going to leave you." Perry was faced with the prospect of losing a standard of living that without her he had never known, and maybe without her he could never even possibly achieve. And he was desperate.
Investigators are confident they now have Perry's motive.
The police believe that the discovery of what really happened at the law firm sparked a violent argument that ended in her death.
In November, 2 months after she disappeared, Janet's family decides to accept the unthinkable and holds a memorial service for her.
I think the amount of people here today reflects how much she'll be missed. It's hard for me to imagine that he would have anything to do with it, but I guess there are some unanswered questions.
Perry refuses to attend Janet's memorial, claiming it's too soon to give up on her return.
There is no evidence that anything has happened to Janet, except that she is not here. I would like to be the first person to know if something has happened to my wife.
It was one thing for Perry to steer clear of the service, but to keep Sammy and Zipporah from attending their mother's memorial was just disgraceful. The war between the Levines and their son-in-law was on.
2 years after Janet March disappeared, the investigation is at a standstill. But the battle between her husband and her parents is just heating up.
Well, the husband of a missing Forest Hills woman was in court this morning trying to gain access to some of her money.
Perry actually was the first one who went into court over the money.
Perry claims he needs money from Janet's estate for child support, but the Levines want to take care of their grandchildren themselves and launch a series of lawsuits.
There were custody battles and visitation battles, lawsuits flung back and forth.
I would hate to think what Mr. Levine's legal fees were, just civilly.
Every few weeks, something would be happening about the money or the children, in addition to, where's Janet?
If the Levines were upset that Perry had brought their grandchildren to Chicago, his next move would leave them devastated. Right in the middle of all their legal wrangling, Perry packed up the kids and headed for the border.
Perry wound up going to live in Mexico in a little town called Ajijic, which is a resort town near Guadalajara, and his father lived there.
Perry's father, Arthur March, a tough ex-Army lieutenant colonel and retired pharmacist, had already been enjoying his life in Mexico for several years.
He's a ex-military type. He claims to have been in the Green Beret, Special Forces, that type of thing. He fancies himself an expert in many, many things.
He's got a lot of blustery, big talk, but when it comes right down to it, he's just kind of a lovable old curmudgeon.
Over the next few years, Perry continues to give interviews to the Nashville media.
Hopefully one day we discover what happened to Janet, and all of this will be an interesting story in my life.
Though Perry maintains Janet is alive, he has no trouble moving on.
He remarries down there, and he marries a woman named Carmen, who is really good looking.
She had 3 children. Together they had a child. He continued to do some sort of practice down there. He claimed to be an attorney.
Perry believes his troubles are fading into the past. But over 2,000 miles away, the Levines press on with their custody litigation.
They didn't want a man that they thought killed their daughter to be raising her beloved children.
A year later, in May 2000, a judge grants the Levines temporary custody. Just days later, they take action.
Carolyn and Larry Levine went to Mexico to take custody of the children.
The arrival of the grandparents was unexpected. The children had gone to school that day, expecting it to be a regular school day. Mr. and Mrs. Levine, accompanied by, as I understand it, it was armed individuals, removed the children from the school, and later that evening flew them to Mexico City and from there to Nashville.
Enraged, Perry fights back.
Carolyn and Larry Levine were accused by Arthur and Perry March of kidnapping the children. It became an unbelievable hate match between the 2 families.
The federal district judge in Nashville ruled that there was no justification for keeping the children outside their habitual residence of Mexico, and ordered the return of the children to Perry March.
Having lost the final round of the custody battle, the Levines raised the stakes.
Lawrence and Carolyn Levine sued Perry March for the wrongful death of their daughter.
I believe her husband murdered her.
Perry refused to come back to Nashville.
Perry is tried in absentia in civil court and found responsible for Janet's death.
The jury rendered $113.5 million judgment against him, which was one of the highest verdicts in the state at the time.
But in a huge victory for Perry, his Nashville lawyers get the judgment overturned on a technicality. Emboldened by his legal victories, Perry resumes his campaign to clear his name.
In the summer of 2004, Perry sent a photograph he saw in a magazine to the Nashville DA. He claimed this photo showed Janet in an Athens bar with some friends during the Olympic Games. Not a single person who knew Janet believed it could be her. Talk about fanning the flames. This guy was unbelievable.
Our hope was to find her body, and that's what we were really pushing. But the leads began to slow down.
8 long years of intensive investigation have turned up little evidence.
The evidence was what it was. It was possible that the evidence may not get any better. We tried as hard as we could to find her body. We couldn't do it.
The DA decides to roll the dice and indict Perry March for murder.
The district attorney and I sat down and determined now was the time to do it.
Down in Mexico, Perry March has no idea that the noose is tightening. The Nashville DA's office secretly arranges for Perry's extradition.
Once he was expelled by the Mexican authorities, we took custody.
Chaperoned by detectives, Perry boards a plane for Nashville.
He had a meal, he took a nap, read a magazine, and then began to ask about the evidence. How do we know Janet's dead? Did we find her body? Then as time went on, he began to ask, what about if I plead guilty? You tell the DA, Tom Thurman, I want to plead guilty. You tell him that I don't want to do more than 7 years in prison because my wife won't wait for me in Mexico.
So, you know, he was making statements that weren't consistent with that of an innocent person.
But the prosecution still faces an uphill battle.
And you do understand the charges on the indictment, is that correct? Fairly well.
They didn't have a crime scene that they could link Perry to. They didn't have a murder weapon.
We had no evidence to show that a homicide had occurred other than Perry's actions, the type of mother and person Janet was.
They really didn't have anything other than she's gone. We don't think she's coming back, and we think he's responsible.
Thank you, ma'am.
We today are announcing the arrest of Perry March on several charges, including second-degree murder.
Perry's in-laws, the Levines, had fought for his arrest for 9 years. Justice finally seemed within reach. Unable to pay his $3 million bail bond, Perry is sent to Nashville City Jail to await trial.
Perry's got 2 jobs to do in custody. That is sit there and keep his mouth shut. But he can't do that.
It seemed Perry March was in love with the sound of his own voice. For almost a decade, he'd been telling his worn-out tale to any media outlet with a working microphone. But now, in jail, his big mouth was about to get him into even bigger trouble.
In the jail, Perry March met up with an inmate from East Nashville who's been in trouble since he was a kid. He had a long criminal history, and the two of them became friends.
His name is Russell Nathaniel Ferris, so we know him as Nate.
One day, Ferris sends a message to the DA that he urgently needs to talk.
And the inmate tells us that Perry March is in the cell next to me, and he's wanting me to kill the Levines.
We were just kind of shocked and amazed when he told us.
To believe that Perry would actually go and try to recruit someone to kill the Levines was incredible to us.
Obviously, we didn't just take his word for it. We said, look, you got to prove it to us. Will he talk about this still? He says, yeah, he talks about it all the time. He never shuts up.
We requested that Nate have a tape recorder with him and record any of these conversations.
Awaiting his own trial for attempted murder, Ferris is more than willing to rat out his neighbor.
Take your time in it. You don't make any mistakes. You work carefully. You figure your common sense. You do what you need to do.
Nathaniel Ferris was supposed to get out. And while he's out on bail, he's supposed to go surveil the Levines, get their patterns down, and then kill both Levines.
I think you just have to remember you have to clear the house with kids, make sure there's no kid there, and then you have to wait for the afternoon they're there together. Yeah. Leave no trace of it.
Perry told him that if the Levines are gone and they don't testify at the murder trial, my chances of acquittal go from 50% up to 90%.
Look here, Perry. If they're both in that house, if they answer that door, it's over.
Of all the people he can pick to help him in this conspiracy, he goes and picks a professional snitch. And that's the beauty of Perry. That's just the beauty of being so entirely criminally unsophisticated and too ignorant to know it.
To sweeten the deal, Perry offers up his father's services.
Arthur March was supposed to give the would-be hitman shelter in Mexico.
If my dad thought you were helping me, my dad would go take a bullet for you and cut tomorrow.
When you get to Mexico, we'll be drinking Coronas on the beach. You live like a king. So he made all kind of promises to Nate, thinking Nate was going along with this.
Perry even helps Ferris come up with an alias.
First and last, if you can remember, it's going to be easy for you when you get here. Okay, Bobby Givens.
A few weeks later, the plan is set into motion.
Ferris gets out of jail. Perry thinks he's getting out on bond. The reality is we faked that. We put him in another jail in another county.
And he starts making a series of phone calls to Arthur March in Mexico.
Hello? Hello? This is Colonel?
Yes.
Hey, how you doing? My name's Bobby Givens.
When Nate made telephone contact with Arthur, Arthur was not surprised. When Perry said you were going to be calling, I'm supposed to help you out in any way I can.
Is it fun down there?
The sky's blue, the beer's cold, the whippet are hot. What the hell else do you need?
5 minutes into that conversation, they're talking about getting the gun. 5 minutes into it. 10 minutes later, they're talking about killing the Levines.
Then Arthur starts big talking, telling him how to do it, which type of instrument to use, how to not print up a weapon.
My suggestion is, from the minute the product is got, you wear fit surgeon's gloves.
Yeah, okay.
You do not take them off at all.
All of this stuff is just unsolicited advice.
All told, Farris supplies police with over 6 hours of recordings.
You could not have picked a worse aide de camp in the killing of the Levines than Nathaniel Farris. That question mark on his neck stands for, am I going to snitch you out or not?
Perry and his father are immediately charged with conspiracy to commit murder.
There were a lot of people that wondered, didn't this lawyer know that he shouldn't be talking to people in the jail?
Well, most people initially didn't believe it because you just had this tremendous feeling, almost incredulous, there's no way he's that stupid. And then, of course, when you heard the tapes, you realized that, yes, he is.
After a decade-long game of cat and mouse, investigators finally had their claws into Perry March and his father. And now they believed that if they could squeeze Arthur even tighter, they might finally be able to solve the mystery of what happened to Janet March.
Colonel.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Bobby. Look here. Everything's done.
Working with police, informant Nate Farris calls Arthur March in Mexico and pretends that he's killed the Levines.
Yeah, but you finished the job up there?
Yeah, that's done. Everything's done. I'm in Houston right now, and I will be in Guadalajara at about 2:30.
So Arthur drives to the airport in Guadalajara.
And the FBI's followed him from his home to the airport.
And an FBI agent walks up to him and says, "Are you Arthur March?" And he says, "Yes."
Initially, he denies his reasons for being there, and then he subsequently admits that he's there to pick up a guy named Bobby Gibbons.
FBI agents arrest Arthur and take him back to Nashville.
As soon as Arthur March gets taken into custody, the case starts unraveling very quickly. Because at this point, police and prosecutors believe that Arthur March had played some type of a role in the disappearance of Janet March.
Once prosecutors play the Farris tapes for Arthur, he knows he's in hot water. Facing 7 to 10 years in prison, he's offered a deal.
He agrees to plead guilty and do 18 months, but the stipulation is he's got to be cooperative with us in terms of the homicide investigation.
State your name for the record, please, sir.
Arthur Wayne March.
And how old are you?
78.
Apparently, Arthur March was as sterling a character as his son. To save his own skin, he turned on Perry and started talking. What he was about to reveal would really cook his son's goose.
Did your son ask you to do something for him, to assist him in a matter?
Yes, they did. Help dispose of Janet's body.
According to Arthur, Perry and Janet had an argument that escalated into a fight, which resulted in her dead.
He never mentioned that he killed her. Never. He used the term accident.
And maybe Arthur believed him, maybe he didn't, but Arthur fancies himself as the fixer. He's one who could fix situations like this.
Arthur loved his son, but he didn't think him entirely capable. Arthur was the kind of guy to say, you know, Perry, you can't do anything right. I mean, you hid the body where?
Arthur tells police that Perry hid Janet's body in a wooded area near their house. But the land was about to be developed. so Perry asked his father to help him move the remains.
Perry describes for Arthur where the body will be, tells him how many paces it is off the road, drives him to the spot.
Did you follow his instructions?
Yes.
Were you able to find?
Yes, with no problem.
If you believe Arthur March, it is the first hard evidence in the whole case. They don't have a body, but he gives them the next best thing. He says, I saw the body.
Perry and he opened the trunk. Perry grabbed one end and I grabbed the other, and we lifted it into the trunk.
Arthur tells the police that he and his son took Janet March's body up to Kentucky.
They check into a hotel, and Perry stays in the hotel, and Arthur is supposed to go off and by himself get rid of this body.
Perry laid down. He said he was very tired. Gave me the keys to the car. I went back and got in the car, went back out to the highway.
So he's looking for a place to bury this body in a stream and can't find a place deep enough when he sees land being cleared.
And it was just getting light. And I drove up, pulled over to the side of the road. And there was a big pile of brush.
He said it made sense to him to put her body in the brush pile because it looked like the type of brush pile that you would burn.
And I cleared away three, you might say like there were holes. And in the first one, I put the clothes that was in there on the top. And then in the next hole, I put Janet. I flipped out the body.
Arthur agrees to take detectives to the spot where he disposed of Janet's remains. They search the area extensively, but come up empty.
What was your purpose in putting the bag in that brush pile?
I had it turned and it would be cremated and there would be no body.
Though police don't have any physical evidence to corroborate Arthur's account, they're convinced he's telling the truth.
Arthur's story had points of it that were almost so incredible that they had to be true, because who would make this up?
And we covered it with Arthur many, many times, and he never deviated, he never changed the story.
And I'm going to say this, when it comes to getting rid of bodies, I think Arthur March is probably the world's leading expert. I mean, I don't think anybody can argue that he didn't do a fine job getting rid of the body.
Why did you agree to help your son get rid of Janet March's body?
It's my son.
By this point, Perry probably wished he'd worked alone. But then again, Arthur did such a good job of cleaning up, the prosecution still didn't have a shred of physical evidence to bring into court.
On August 9th, 2006, almost 10 years to the day that Janet March vanished, her husband Perry goes on trial for her murder.
This case is about murder, about deceit, about an abuse of trust.
The dangerous thing about prosecuting a murder without a body is, you know, it's the old argument, and I now present to you Janet March, and see how many people turn around and look. And you look at them and say, well, if you looked, you have reasonable doubt.
And I don't know if she's dead. You know what? Leave it at that.
The prosecution hopes Perry's actions after Janet disappeared and his obvious motive will be enough to sway the jury.
He told me that he was afraid Janet was going to divorce him and take his children from him.
What was the crime that the discussion was brought up about?
For me to murder the Levines.
Whose idea was that?
It was Perry's idea.
The state's star witness, Arthur March, is too ill to attend the trial, but his videotaped confession grips the courtroom.
When Arthur admitted that he actually disposed of the body, it was maybe the mystery has been solved.
As the evidence against Perry steadily mounts, his behavior surprises the courtroom.
He came off as arrogant, patronizing, condescending.
I choose not to testify.
And that didn't play well.
After 7 long days of testimony, the case goes to the jury.
All right, if you would stand, please, sir, there and announce the verdict on behalf of the jury.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Perry Avram March, as to count 1, guilty of second-degree murder, as to count 2, guilty of abuse of a corpse, as to count 3, guilty of tampering with evidence.
I would like to express our profound gratitude to the many people in the Nashville community who gave support to us in our pursuit of justice for our daughter and for our grandchildren. That's all we have to say.
I think they had a passion that justice could be done for Janet, and they had a resolve about them that they were going to see it through.
Can I give you a hug now?
Perry March is sentenced to 56 years in state prison. Arthur March's plea deal of 18 months is thrown out by a federal judge who sentences him to 5 years. But just 4 months into his sentence, Arthur dies at the age of 79.
In its wake, this case has left victim upon victim upon victim. More than Janet Levine died in August of '96.
I think the theme of this whole case was all the tragedies of the people involved, all the lives that were impacted by this action of Perry March.
Perry March thought he was smarter than everybody else, and I think in so believing that is what led to his downfall.
He had a great chance of beating this if he had just kept his mouth shut.
He arrested bitter defeat from the jowls of utter victory, and that takes some doing.
From prison, Perry is still making trouble. Not only has he filed a petition about the size of his jail cell, he's suing to have his children removed from the Levine's care and sent to live with his second wife in Mexico. Some people have no shame. For Court TV, I'm Dominic Dunn.
A shocking disappearance.
This was a real whodunit mystery, with the people being involved being powerful.
A desperate family.
They lived in a neighborhood where the police didn't come searching for a dead body.
And a 10-year quest for the truth.
I would like to know if something happened to my wife.
A perfect life destroyed by the perfect crime. Tonight on Power, Privilege, and Justice.
On a warm day in late August 1996, a Nashville attorney named Perry March walks into the police department to report his wife missing. With his father-in-law and brother-in-law at his side, Perry tells police that 33-year-old Janet hasn't been seen or heard from in over 2 weeks.
Perry March said she just left. She just got angry and she just left. He told the police that his wife had gotten upset with him because he didn't do enough work around the house.
At this particular night, they had an argument that Janet determined she was just going to leave, and that she would be back in 12 days. She drove off in the Volvo with her luggage.
Janet didn't tell her husband where she was going. He says all she left behind was a long to-do list, which he had signed at the bottom.
The list is marked Perry's turn for Janet's 12-day vacation. Some of the things on the list do children's laundry, go through bill drawer and pay bills. Everyday type things, but it was as if she was having to remind him to do these things.
The night she left, Perry had told Janet's parents, Carolyn and Larry Levine, about her departure, and they anxiously awaited her return. But once 12 days had come and gone, the Levines' concern turned to panic.
I believe Larry Levine even gets somewhat criticized by the detective for not coming forward sooner.
Janet March's disappearance came to light 2 weeks after her husband said that she went missing. And it was 2 weeks of time that the police lost.
Police begin their investigation at the March home in Forest Hills, one of Nashville's most exclusive neighborhoods. The March's babysitter tells them something hadn't felt right the day Janet disappeared.
She saw Janet working on the computer, and she knew Janet was consumed most of the day working on the computer, which was not typical Janet.
Speaking to Janet's friends, police discover that the timing of Janet's vacation is highly suspicious.
Her oldest son, Sammy, was going to be 6 years old. Janet had sent the invitations out for his birthday party.
Sammy's birthday had arrived, but Janet still didn't come home. Perry and the Levines decided to go ahead with the party anyway.
People that knew her said, well, why would she send out invitations for a birthday?